Um. Okay. So, as a way that I think I hear the law being talked about sometimes, that kind of baffles me a little bit, which is how sometimes the law is treated as something that will really prevent any evil from happening. It really will maintain order. The law itself. There's a sort of metaphysical assumption here, almost like it's somehow the law that does this. It's not people. It's not politics, right? It's not like people reaching agreements and then sort of protecting those agreements and honoring them in some way and having some sort of an ethical relationship to them. It's like at some point the human being feels this desire for archetype and it starts projecting it everywhere basically. I think in moments of crisis precisely, right? In moments of deep material crisis. As in, you can't eat, you can't work, you don't have food, you don't have a place to sleep, and so on. In those moments, this gets fostered, this sort of deep drive for the archetypes, and it gets projected anywhere. And it seems that one of the places it gets projected, funnily, is the law, which is funny because it somehow has something to do with religion, right? The idea of the law has something to do with God and how God is talked about, like in Christianity. And since I think that the material problems in our world are being driven by a certain series of ideas called capitalism, which then are and become somehow an echo of somehow they become an echo of the culture in which they're being created, which is seems to have been a culture of Christianity, right, in Europe, etc. So there's some sort of aspect to it, which, yeah, this is something I haven't sort of researched that much. I know there's isn't there a book by Max Weber about this, the Protestant work ethic, and so forth, and how it relates to this. But there is some aspect of this that just has something to do with the law and and Christianity in this sense of the law, this sort of eternal divine law. There's a desire for this law, for this rigidity of how things are and should be, which is good. It's cool. I think it's good. It's good in the sense of the divine. It's good in the sense of your own sort of relationship to God. But it's not good in a society. It's not good as a sort of it becomes just a delusion to put your mind to that instead of putting it to actual relationships between people, therefore politics again. So the way this happens, I think, is that we start sort of creating a sort of idea that without certain laws, without law in general, there could be some sort of a state that is a lawless state, and it would be, well, I mean, it could be one of two ways, really. It could either be extremely bad or it could be extremely good, right? Those are two sort of ideas we have about this. I just don't think that you can have a world without law in this specific way, because, well, first of all, okay, let's look at an example. For example, an example that comes to mind always for me is music. For example, if we didn't have music on planet Earth, if all music disappeared, what would the world be like? What would life be like? You know what I mean? I've seen this thought experiment being done sometimes in casual conversation, I mean, in social settings. And sometimes there is this sense that if somehow the world entered into a place where there was no music, something would happen. Some again, like something would be unlocked. It would either be like an amazing utopia, or it would be a terrifying chaos nightmare. But how can we know this? How can we know this? How could we know what the world would be like without music? It never has been without music. We don't have, like, and when we say the world, like, we specifically mean like a recognizably human world, you know? Who knows what what lizards do? Maybe lizards have their own sort of music that we have no understanding of and no way to sort of talk to them about it. So who knows? Let's talk about like actual humans that we can communicate with language and texts and history and so on, right? It seems that we have at least records or archaeological evidence of music and rhythm somehow existing forever, basically forever, in at least the human world, and it never has stopped. And even in cases like deep dictatorships on this planet where music is censored, it never is. No matter how deep the dictatorship is, there's always like underground groups illegally playing music. Or maybe a certain kind of music is played, the music that the dictatorship likes, and then that's the music that's played everywhere, but it's still some sort of music. Or, you can play music in the middle of a war when you're deeply suffering. You can, right? I mean, there's music played in the middle of suffering situations. There's music played in joyful situations, in mundane places when you're bored. Like, there's not a single place where music isn't played in some situation or another. So what would it mean, a world in which music isn't played? Like, what does that mean? First of all, like, if we're doing this thought experiment, my first question would be, how do we know that this is even possible? How do we know that a world without music could even exist? Because again, we have this sort of historical evidence that in terrible moments in human history, music was played. In really good moments, music was played. Good moments for certain people, like they were enjoying themselves, they played music. They were bored, they played music. Sometimes music is played just in the background, even when, like now in our modern age, there's just music playing in shops or whatever, and you're not really paying attention to it. Blah blah blah. There's music played even if you don't have any money, right? There's music played. You can whistle, you can tap. If you have a lot of money, then incredible sort of technological music is played. There doesn't seem to be, as far as I can tell, like a material boundary to music. No matter how suffering and poor a situation you're in is, there's music. You can play music. And in fact, it seems that tends to happen. Almost you could say that it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that you're not having like the kind of material life that you would like to have. And the same the other way around. Like, it doesn't seem to go away when people satisfy all their material desires. They still play music. They still listen to music. Like, music doesn't seem to go away ever. I can't think of a single moment in history, in all sort of material space of the human sphere, that doesn't have something to do with music at some point. I'm not saying music is playing 24/7. It's not playing now in my room. But I mean that there never seems to be like a limit really to it. Again, especially because it can like happen just with our bodies. We can tap it, we can whistle it, we can sing it, and so on. So then, could a world without music exist? Like, imagining a world that descends into chaos because there's no music, to me, just doesn't make any sense. It's sort of, it doesn't seem to have anything to do with the structures in which our world happens. And to sort of cut this metaphor short a little bit, that's what I meant. That's what I mean with law. I get a similar feeling with law, right? If you were to say, for example, oh, how terrifying it would be if music disappeared. Like, we know, somehow we understand that that's kind of a statement that doesn't completely make sense, right? This example I gave, I think we would normally see that it isn't something that that holds everything together. We kind of, when it comes to music and art, we don't take it that seriously. We know, like, oh yeah, well, sure, music isn't that crucial. It doesn't completely like hold everything, our civilization together. But then when we talk about law and certain like political structures, we seem to assume that they're like some sort of fundamental order of the universe has something to do with them, and that if they were to disappear, we would fall into chaos. How? Again, like, even in because again, there's something similar seems to happen. If law means like agreements and concessions and compromises and rules and so on, those are established all the time in all sorts of situations. They're established in the playground amongst children. They're established in the middle of a war. Again, there might be all sorts of impromptu little rules being established that have nothing to do with the greater framework of the laws of that country. There may be, little rules being established as games at rich people's parties and so on. Like rules, laws, and things like that. Can we really believe that they would disappear? That there could be a world in which there are no rules, no laws? In what sense? What does it mean? I think it's just used to sort of mythologize the rules we have now. Again, it's just a way to sort of mythologize anything that we have now that's the status quo now, and saying, oof, thank God it is the way it is now, because otherwise it would just collapse. It can't collapse. There is no historical evidence for things collapsing because of that. How would you prove that when wars happen, it's because of because a certain law, a certain idea was not passed, or was what would be the experiment to conduct for that? I don't know. I don't know what kind of experiments you can conduct to do that. Just as with music, if you said, oh, in the year something in the past, there was a whole year when like all all concerts were shut down because everyone was concentrating on the war or something, and there was no music in concert halls, and then things got worse. Like, yeah, well, like, it's just like anecdotal connection of like, it's just connecting things in your mind. You can't, it's synchronicity basically is what we're talking about. It's like, it's a causal connection, and synchronicity is really cool. Once again, synchronicity is really cool, but it has nothing to do with convincing other people of your position. Like, if you have a synchronicity and you try to convince other people that they should act a certain way because you've seen this connection, or even if you try to sort of say that this is a connection that any reasonable person should see, and then act in a certain way because of that, I just don't think that's how things should work in politics. Politics should be about, again, reaching agreements between different people who have different sort of desires. And so the specific perspective on the world you have, I don't think has much or so much to say about it, about the situation of people meeting with meeting desires. that have some sort of a tension between them. So I don't know. Again, just maybe I'm sort of extending my welcome here, overextending my welcome. I don't know if I've made my point. I'll just I don't know. We'll see. I hope it made some sort of sense. So I'll leave it at that. Yeah, goodbye. Bye. See you.